Founders of Alexandria. By Star Scribe. Part 6. Interlude. Last night, little Riley had learned that the information Alex had shown her from the library hadn't been wrong after all. Just as the equestrian books said, she could will herself into new forms. The effort was exhausting, and she had very little idea of what she was doing. Yet the instinct was there. With the original pony helpless before her, she had all the time in the world to make sure she got every detail exactly right. The pony who called herself Carol, whose real name was apparently True Sight, had been easy to copy in the end. The body of a changeling was literally built for it. Transforming for the first time had been almost as wonderful as feeding for the first time, and not just because of how it felt. Imitating Carol, changing hard kite into soft fur, meant more than just taking another body for herself. If she could do it once, she could do it as often as she had the strength. She didn't have to be a freak anymore. She could look like somebody normal, and it would be easier for her to get their attention. It would be easier not to go hungry. Yet her first change had come for good reason. Alexandria contained a danger far more severe than the survivors that had shot at her in St. Louis. As surely as she knew that love was good and pain was bad, she knew that the thing in Alexandria would do far worse than just kill her friends. It would swallow their insides and fill them up with shadow. She wouldn't be able to feed, then. A shadow could not feel anything, only pretend. How Riley knew this she couldn't have said, but know it she did. Beings like herself did not hesitate, they acted. She couldn't fly into town, much as she wanted to. She didn't have enough practice with her wings, and anyway Carol's bat-like wings didn't work the same as her graceful transparent ones. She would have to act without flight. Not being able to fly wasn't nearly as strange as being suddenly gigantic. Carol the bat pony was taller than cloudy skies, at least a foot taller than Riley had been. Not only that, but she felt so strangely adult, mature in ways her young mind didn't fully comprehend. What little girl hadn't dreamt of being an adult, and enjoying all the privileges of adulthood? She couldn't explore her mystical adult powers now, not when there was a city to save. Perhaps not save. She hadn't gone into town knowing what the state of things would be, after all. She hadn't even known for sure if looking like the captured pony would be enough. What if there were secret handshakes Carol was supposed to know? What if the bat pony hadn't really been won over to their cause? What if they planned for changeling infiltrations, and all the secret words she had been told were really code for "please kill me now"? But they hadn't been. After a ride into town with cloudy skies, Riley had bound her wing in the most convincing way she could, smearing it all over with stage blood. Apparently she was a natural at that too, because every pony she saw seemed quite concerned to see her. Concerned wasn't quite the right word. They had seemed positively befuddled. Somehow, she knew why that was too. The being that controlled them had its concentration elsewhere. It was mighty, yes, but no god. It was a fallen, disgusting imitation of the real thing. Her sworn enemy without even having to meet. Even when the strangers had first arrived in Alexandria, she had known something was wrong. She had reconsidered attending their first meeting at the last second, choosing to hide in the trailer when she felt the strange twisting in her gut for the first time. She never went out on her own after that, and almost never left the trailer during the day. That decision had probably saved her life as surely as this one might cost it. She might be dressed up, but she was still going straight into the creature's den, delivering herself right to the platter. This mission didn't call for her. It called for, she didn't really understand. Lesser versions of her? Like limbs she wasn't afraid of losing. She longed for true versions of the phantom bodies she sometimes felt, and now that she had need of one she positively ached for them. Whatever the strange urge was, it wasn't granted. So Riley the changeling queen, ever pragmatic, had rolled up her non-existent sleeves to get the dirty job done herself. At the very least, she could learn more and deliver that information to Alex when she returned from Philadelphia. She would know what to do. Alex always knew what to do, it was as much her nature as needing the attention of ponies was part of Riley's. When she had started hearing gunshots, Riley had abandoned the pretext of her injured shamble and galloped for the sound right along with her escort. She knew where they would be going, Alexandria's library. Yet as she neared it, she felt again at a distance the strange chill that would tear her magic away. It felt awful, like it was turning her body to clay the closer it got. It wasn't painful exactly, but she recognized the feeling anyway. It was the reverse of what she had felt when she had taken this form. The HPI vehicles had machines to take magic away. Evidently those machines worked on her magic too, strange brand though it was. She couldn't approach. With their distraction and her own natural stealth, Riley slipped out of the rush, letting them continue along without her for the library. She dared go no closer than the movie theater, slipping inside and collapsing to pant on the floor. She had no way of telling Cloudy Skies how she was doing, they hadn't wanted to risk her bringing anything Carol hadn't flown out wearing. She probably could have gone much closer to the field before she was actually forced back into her original form. She was far too afraid to take the risk. What would happen to her if she drew Odium's notice and it sent its puppet ponies after her again? Cloudy Skies wouldn't be coming to her rescue this time. No pony would. As she thought, a distant explosion shook the city. Without preamble, the anti-magic field and all its horrible implications abruptly vanished from her sensation. She gave caution 10 seconds before turning back out the door and galloping the rest of the way. Though she could see little out of place in the direction that was her destination, her strange senses showed her a very different picture. It was loose. A naked singularity, a great invisible snake that radiated despair and mocked the sanctity of life. She too knew what it was like to be unwelcome in the world. What her body could not produce on its own, she obtained from ponies who could, and that was how she found her place. This being hadn't even tried to weave itself into the tapestry of life. A dozen different names for the creature flashed through her mind, words she wouldn't have been able to pronounce as a human. Eventually, she settled on one she could pronounce. Abaddon. Every step she took brought her closer to the light that cast shadows the wrong way, dragging life and strength towards it as black holes drew cosmic gas. Yet against all her expectations, ignoring every instinct, the being did not attack her. It didn't even notice her. As she reached the library, she found a war zone. A hole had been blasted in the building, and a huge HPI vehicle like a tank had been torn into pieces and scattered about the street. Ponies had been stunned, ponies lying on the ground or trapped in nets. A few still held guns, or rested near them, yet stood staring off into nothing. Among them she saw Adrian. She went to him, fleeing to the first pony in all the world that had ever been kind to her. She sensed the dark malice about him like a cloud, swirling around the event horizon that was Abaddon. It twisted and constricted about him, preventing his movement but little else. It had not dragged him down with it yet, much as it wanted to. The being's influence was thin around him. Whatever was going on inside evidently required most of its concentration. She stood right before him, and spoke with Carol's voice. "Adrian, are you all right? Can you move?" He seemed confused. He looked at her, then through her. One lip nearly quivered, one hoof nearly lifted. Neither did. The weight pressing down on him was too great. In her few months in Alexandria, Riley had needed to relearn much of how to live. Kindness she had learned from Adrian, who had seen her soul and ignored her body. The importance of knowledge she had learned from Joseph, who had been able to discover the answer to any question. Oliver had taught her to see beauty again in growing things, which looked and felt so strange to her now. Sky had taught her 2 lessons, that she was a monster, and that she could be something else. Mariah had taught her too, though it had only been by example. She had seen in her that she had the power to decide to be happy, if she wanted to be. From Alex last of all, Riley had learned that no sacrifice was too great to save the ones you loved. Instinct whispered other words, caution was always safest. She ought to move slowly, never attract attention, and never take risks. Yet that same instinct came from the part of her that knew Abaddon. The part of her that revolted the souls of the ponies she met. The part of herself that she hated. Riley would not be controlled, she wouldn't be a doll or a puppet, not even to herself. She would be Riley no matter what the world tried to do. What was the point of living if you lived in shame? What was the point of having a family if you wouldn't protect them? The world itself had taken her first family away, and she had been able to do nothing. How could she live with herself if she stood by and let it happen a second time? Riley pressed her forehead to Adrian, though she knew what she was about to do would draw the attention of the thing her people called Abaddon down upon her. She did so, and didn't care. Blacklight did not understand what it was like to be a changeling, not really. She knew from the equestrian books that she somehow ate emotions. She took something from ponies, something creatures like her couldn't ever have on their own. It was the very essence of life, since her body could not exist without it. She was not odium, to blight the world and draw all that was good unto itself to be consumed. Yet still she consumed. Not this time. This time she gave. She had to change back to do it. In a flicker of light and green magic, her form began to twist. She felt the strange energy flowing around her, heard the creak of bones and the squelching of fluids in her chest. Fur vanished along with the false cutie marks, and her horn returned. Adrian grew taller and taller before her, and she only reached his chest. All the while instinct screamed she was making the wrong choice, screamed that she was going to get herself killed, that she shouldn't let any pony see her in her real skin ever again. She ignored it all. Once she had her fangs, she bit down on Adrian's chest, hard enough to break the skin. She ignored the coppery taste of blood with the same ease any queen would, devoting the multitude of her separate conscious threads to reversing the process of her usual feeding. What had always been a subconscious process became quite difficult when going the other way, yet not impossible. She managed in the end. Where the being called Odium had taken passion from Adrian and left him a shell, the little changeling did the opposite. Through the wound, Riley poured a flood of passionate love more intense than anyone could naturally experience. Pure, concentrated emotion. She felt herself extend then, quite reflexively. Without knowing how she did it, Riley's consciousness extended in a way it had never done before. While the rest of her was concerned with the physical world, a single fraction saw something else. A young stallion, grey in flesh and form, lay supine in a desert like old bones. The ground sloped downward, slow but inexorable, and a stone rested not far away from him. The stone had a huge chain wrought of words, running to his hooves and fastening there. Though he resisted, the stone dragged him down with it, further and further from the distant light at the horizon. Well, he was almost Adrian. Some of his features blurred the difference between human and pony. The shackles never touched skin, but furred flesh where hooves were instead of feet. She watched him reach for the chains with his hooves, only for them to pass through them as though they weren't there. She watched the color flood back into him. Grey skin going dark mahogany, his face taking on one of his characteristically stubborn expressions. She kept pouring the emotions into him, until the tide of feelings was too great for Odium to suppress. "What do I do?" he asked. "Whatever you want." She reached out, and with their strength together they broke the chains. "You're free." And just like that, he was.